The cellar was cold enough to see my breath. My hands were shaking. Not from the cold, from something else. Something I didn't have a word for yet. 12 hours ago, my mother-in-law had laughed in my face. Right there in that fancy Albany law office. Laughed so loud the paralegal down the hall came running to see what was wrong. She'd pointed at me, wearing her fur coat, diamonds on every finger. And she'd said the words I'll never forget as long as I live. Even a woman who barely knew you could see you're worthless. Then the lawyer handed me my inheritance. A single $1 bill. Crumpled, green, humiliating. My ex-husband snickered. His new wife covered her mouth to hide the smile. And I walked out of that office with $1 in my pocket and $47,000 in medical debt hanging around my neck. They thought they'd finished me. They had no idea. Because right now, 12 hours later, I was standing in a climate-controlled cellar 3 floors beneath a Victorian mansion nobody knew existed. My fingers curled around a dusty white sheet. I pulled it back slowly. An oil painting. James Rothbury. Signed. Authenticated. Worth more than my house. My car. Every paycheck I'd ever earned. Combined. And behind it, 62 more. I whispered into the dark. $15 million. My name is Adeline Marsh. And this is the story of how $1 changed everything. To understand how I got into that cellar, you have to go back. Back to 24 hours before I ever knew this house existed. Back to a morning that started like every other morning that year. Broken, bleeding money, and exhausted down to the bone. 5:30 in the morning. Yonkers, New York. The alarm didn't wake me. I hadn't slept. I'd been sitting at the kitchen table since 3, staring at a stack of bills that seemed to multiply every time I looked away. $47,000 in medical debt. 3 months behind on rent. An electric bill with a red shut-off notice. The coffee in my mug was cold. I drank it anyway, because reheating it meant using the microwave, and using the microwave meant electricity. And electricity was something I now counted in pennies. That's what my life had become. Counting pennies. Skipping meals. Wondering if today was the day everything finally collapsed. Then I heard it. The scream. Sharp. Rising. The kind of sound only a mother recognizes. I dropped the mug. Coffee splattered across the linoleum. I was already moving. Down the hallway. Into the small bedroom, where my son slept on a twin mattress I'd bought secondhand from a woman on Craigslist. Theo. Baby. What's wrong? He was on the floor, cross-legged, his face red, his hands pulling at his sock, with the kind of desperate focus that broke me every time I saw it. Off, off, off. 3 words. Same word, really. Repeated until it stopped being a word and started being an alarm. I dropped to my knees, pulled the sock off, turned it inside out, smoothed the seam, slid it back on. Better. He didn't answer. He never really answered, but he leaned his forehead against my shoulder for 3 seconds before rolling away to line up his crayons on the windowsill. 3 seconds. That was our whole conversation. And I'd take it. God, I'd take it every day for the rest of my life. Theo was 7 years old. He should have been in 2nd grade, learning cursive, reading chapter books, trading Pokemon cards at recess with kids named Jaden and Mason. Instead, he was homeschooled through a state program because the public school couldn't handle him, because the private school for kids like him cost $38,000 a year, which might as well have been $38 million. Theo had been diagnosed at 4. ADHD combined type, autism spectrum, sensory processing disorder, a whole alphabet soup of words that meant one thing. My son needed help, special help, expensive help, and I was doing it alone. Ms. Marguerite Delacroix came 3 times a week. Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday. She was a speech and behavioral interventionist with 22 years of experience. She charged $180 per session. I owed her for 6. She never asked. She just kept coming. Kept telling me Theo was making progress. He drew a house yesterday, Adeline, with windows and a chimney. Do you know how significant that is? I nodded, smiled, pretended I understood, pretended I wasn't calculating how many more sessions I could steal from her before she finally stopped answering my calls. That was my life, stealing from good people, because I had no other choice. But Theo drew. That was the thing about him, the thing nobody expected. He drew houses, constantly, since he was 3. Big ones, small ones, cottages, mansions, cabins with smoke curling from stone chimneys. He couldn't tell me his own name half the time, but he could sketch a 3-story Victorian with wraparound porches and a slate roof. From memory. Memory of what? I never knew. Ms. Marguerite said something to me once. I never forgot it. Kids like Theo sometimes see things the rest of us miss. Don't call it coincidence too quickly. I laughed it off at the time. I'm not laughing anymore. I made Theo breakfast. Toast with the last of the peanut butter. A banana with brown spots I cut off carefully. Then I got dressed for my shift. I worked nights at the emergency room at Mount Vernon Hospital. Not as a nurse. My license had lapsed 2 years ago when I couldn't afford the continuing education credits. I worked as a patient care technician. $12 an hour. I made about $2,400 a month. Rent was $1,400. The math never worked. It hadn't worked in 18 months. I dropped Theo at Mrs. Kowalski's apartment on the 2nd floor. She was 73, Polish, widowed. She watched Theo for $8 an hour and never complained when he stymied or paced. She was the closest thing to family I had left. Long shift today, Kochany? Just 8 hours. I'll be back by 2. Go. Theodore and I will make pierogi. Theo walked past me without a goodbye. He didn't do goodbyes. He just moved through the world at his own speed. On his own frequency. I stood in the hallway a moment longer than I needed to, watching him, remembering why I was still fighting. Then I went to work. The letter was waiting when I got home. Certified, cream-colored, heavy stock, gold ink return address. Blackwood and Finch, attorneys at law, Albany, New York. My stomach dropped. The last time I got a certified letter from a law office, my husband had filed for divorce while I was sitting next to Theo's crib after his diagnosis appointment. I ripped it open. In the hallway, my hands not steady enough to wait. Dear Ms. Marsh, it is with sincere condolence that we inform you of the passing of your great-aunt, Wilhelmina Prudence Ashford, on November 3, 2024. Ms. Ashford has named you as a beneficiary in her last will and testament. Great-aunt Wilhelmina. I hadn't thought about her in years. Maybe a decade. She was somebody who existed in the far background of my childhood. A name on a Christmas card. $10 folded inside, always. A shaky signature at the bottom. Love always, Aunt Willa. I hadn't seen her since I was 9 years old. And now she was dead. And she'd left me something. My knees felt strange. I sat down on the hallway floor. Mrs. Kowalski came out with a glass of water. Sit. Breathe. Read the rest. I read the rest. The reading of the will is scheduled for Friday, November 14th, at 10 a.m. at our Albany offices. Your presence is required. Friday. 3 days away. I did something I hadn't done in 6 years. I called my mother. Her name was Constance Wentworth. She was 68. She lived alone in a 1-bedroom condo in Sarasota, Florida. And we hadn't been close since my father died in 2018. Not because we fought. Not because of anything specific. Just because grief has a way of making people into strangers. The phone rang 4 times. I almost hung up. Then she answered. Adeline. Mom. Hi. Silence. Long enough that I checked my phone. Is Theo all right? Theo's fine. I need to ask you something. All right. I took a breath. Aunt Willa died. Did you know? Silence again. Longer. Yes. I knew. Her lawyer called me 2 weeks ago. Wait. What? You knew? Why didn't you tell me? Because I hoped you wouldn't be in the will. The line went quiet. Mom, what are you talking about? She exhaled. Long tired. The kind of exhale you make when you've been carrying something for decades and you finally have to set it down. Because if you're in the will, the Kensingtons will be there. And if the Kensingtons are there, Vivian will find a way to humiliate you. Publicly. That's what she does. My throat went dry. Mom, what does Vivian Kensington have to do with Aunt Willa? Another silence. Adeline, please, just don't go. I have to go. She left me something. It might be money. You know I need money. It won't be money. It'll be a joke. Vivian will make sure of it. Mom, I have to go. Wait. She hung up. I sat holding a dead phone, trying to figure out what my mother knew that she wasn't telling me. Trying to figure out what my dead great-aunt had to do with the woman who'd spent the last 4 years destroying my life. I didn't figure it out. Not yet. Friday morning came too fast. I wore the only black outfit I owned. A polyester blazer from Goodwill. A blouse from 2019. Slacks with a snag in the knee I hoped nobody would notice. I ironed everything 3 times. Twice for the wrinkles. Once because ironing was the only thing keeping my hands from shaking. I dropped Theo at Mrs. Kowalski's. Kissed the top of his head. He didn't look up from his crayons. Then I drove 2 hours north to Albany. The gas gauge dropping steadily the whole way. I had $11 in my wallet. I hoped it was enough for the return trip. The law office was in a restored brownstone off Washington Avenue. Marble steps, brass fixtures, a doorman who looked at my code and clearly decided I was in the wrong place. "Are you sure you're at the right address, ma'am?" Blackwood and Finch. 10 o'clock. He checked his clipboard. His eyebrows lifted slightly. Then he opened the door. 3rd floor. Conference room B. I took the elevator. Alone. Watching myself in the polished bronze walls. I looked tired. I looked scared. I looked like a woman who was about to be humiliated in front of the people who'd already destroyed her. And I was right. Vivian Kensington was already there, sitting at the far end of a long mahogany conference table, wearing a black Chanel suit, a mink coat draped over the back of her chair, diamond earrings, a pearl necklace with a diamond clasp. 62 years old, silver hair, lipstick the color of dried blood. She looked up when I walked in, and she smiled, not warmly, the way a cat smiles at a mouse that's just wandered into the wrong room. "Adeline, how brave of you to come." I didn't answer. I sat down at the opposite end of the table, as far from her as I could get. Bradford was there, my ex-husband, 36 years old, blonde, handsome in that hollow way that always looked better in photographs. He wouldn't look at me. Next to him sat Celeste Ashcroft, his new wife, a partner at a Manhattan litigation firm. She was tapping her red nails on a leather portfolio. I hated her instantly. "Shall we begin?" The voice came from the head of the table, a man I hadn't noticed. Because he'd been so quiet, so still, that he'd blended into the wood paneling. Harrison Blackwood, 67 years old, white hair cropped close, a gray suit that fit too well to be off the rack, eyes the color of slate. He looked at me first. Not at Vivian, not at Bradford, at me, and for half a second, he nodded. I didn't understand it then. I would. Blackwood opened a leather folder, adjusted his reading glasses, and began. "The last will and testament of Wilhelmina Prudence Ashford." Vivian shifted. Impatient. "Just get to the part that matters, Harrison." Blackwood did not look up. "To my niece by marriage, Vivian Kensington, I leave my collection of vintage costume jewelry and my complete library of first edition American poetry." The room went silent. Vivian's face did something remarkable. It froze. Then it flushed. Then it went bone white. "Costume jewelry. Yes. And poetry books. Yes." She let out a short, sharp sound. "Is this a joke?" "No, Mrs. Kensington. This is your inheritance." Bradford glanced at his mother. Then back at the table. Said nothing. Blackwood continued. "To my nephew by marriage, Bradford Kensington, I leave one 1987 Buick Skylark, currently in storage in Rensselaer County." Bradford exhaled. Not amused either. He shook his head slightly. Then he smirked. "Well, that should cover the gas home." Celeste actually giggled. Out loud. In a conference room. During the reading of a woman's last wishes. Something cold moved through me. Blackwood turned a page. Looked at me. And finally, to Adeline Marie Marsh. Every head in the room turned. "I leave the sum of $1, to be paid in cash." Immediately following this reading. Silence. Real silence. The kind that has weight. Then Vivian laughed. Not a chuckle. A full, throaty, delighted laugh that filled the room and echoed off the glass and made the paralegal in the hallway look up in alarm. $1. She turned to me. Eyes bright. $1, Adeline. Isn't that fitting? I didn't answer. I couldn't. My throat had closed. Even a woman who barely knew you could see you're worthless. Even a dying old woman in a mansion nobody's visited in 30 years could see it. That's what this is, isn't it? Confirmation. From the universe. That you are exactly what I've always said you were. Bradford stared at the table. Celeste covered her mouth, pretending to cough. My face burned. I dug my fingernails into my palms hard enough to leave marks. I would not cry in this room. If I cried, they won. I looked at Blackwood. He was watching me. Steady. Patient. He reached into his folder, pulled out a crisp $1 bill, and slid it across the polished mahogany. I stood up, my legs weak, and I walked the length of that table, past Bradford, who wouldn't look up, past Celeste, whose smile faltered when I got close. I stopped at the head of the table. Blackwood held out the bill. I reached for it, and that's when I felt it. Something else. Underneath. A small piece of cardstock. Cream-colored. Heavy. He passed it to me, without moving his eyes from my face. Without so much as a flicker. His voice was quiet. Casual. The kind of voice a lawyer uses to say something boring. Ms. Marsh, I will need to speak with you privately tomorrow morning. Please meet me at this address at 9 o'clock sharp. It is a matter of some importance regarding your inheritance. Vivian's laugh choked off. What inheritance? She just got her $1. Blackwood did not look at Vivian. He kept his gray eyes on me. Tomorrow, Ms. Marsh. 9 a.m. Do not be late. I took the $1. I took the card. I turned and walked out of that conference room without a single word. Behind me, I heard Vivian start laughing again. Louder. Meaner. I kept walking. I made it all the way to my car before my legs gave out. I sat in the driver's seat of that broken-down Corolla in a parking garage in Albany, and I let out one long, ragged breath. Just one. Then I looked at the card. An address in a town I'd never heard of. Ravenswood Hollow, Columbia County, New York, and a single sentence, written by hand in blue ink. Trust me, this is not what it looks like. I drove home in a daze. I remembered pulling into a Wawa outside of Kingston. A woman in the parking lot, with a screaming toddler looking at me strangely. I bought a coffee I couldn't afford. I paid with the $1 Aunt Willa left me, plus $1.40 from my own wallet. I couldn't stand the thought of that $1 in my pocket, burning there. When I got home, Mrs. Kowalski had already put Theo to bed. She'd fed him pierogi and given him a bath and read him 3 books about trucks. He is Angel. Now you go rest. You look terrible. I laughed, because she was right. I went into Theo's room, sat on the edge of his mattress, watched him sleep. He was curled on his side, his small hand still gripping a green crayon. There was a piece of paper on the pillow next to him. Face down, I picked it up, turned it over, and my whole body went cold. A drawing. A house. 3 stories tall. Victorian. White paint peeling in the sketch. A slate roof. Wraparound porches. A stone chimney on the left. Half-moon windows on the top floor. And in front of the house, a lake. Gray. Still. Surrounded by bare trees. I had never told Theo about a house like this. I had never seen a house like this. Not in real life. Not in a photograph. Not in a movie. But I was holding a business card in my other hand, from a lawyer I'd just met, with an address for a place I'd never heard of. Ravenswood Hollow. I looked at the drawing, then at the card, then at my sleeping son. MS. Marguerite's voice came back. Kids like Theo sometimes see things the rest of us miss. I sat on the edge of my son's mattress for a long time. Then I stood up, walked into the kitchen, started making coffee, because I wasn't going to sleep tonight. Because tomorrow morning I had a 2-hour drive north, to a town that wasn't on any map. At 6:30, I woke Theo up gently. He was cranky, confused. He didn't want to leave the house. Baby, we're going on an adventure. Just you and me. He looked at me, really looked. Then he pointed at the drawing on his pillow. He tapped it, twice, and then he said something. Just one word, clear as a bell. There. I stopped breathing for a moment. Then I picked up my son, wrapped him in his blanket, grabbed my keys, and walked out into the November dark, toward a house I'd never seen, toward a truth that was about to change everything I thought I knew about my life, toward a cellar 3 floors underground, where a dead woman I'd barely known had left me a fortune worth more than $15 million, and a secret worth even more than that. The fog started somewhere around Hudson. Thick, gray, the kind of fog that swallows headlights. Theo was asleep in the back seat, cheek pressed against the window. My phone lost signal outside of Kingston. The GPS just kept spinning, finding nothing, because Ravenswood Hollow wasn't on any map. I had to stop at a gas station in Claverack. An old man behind the counter, with a name tag, that said Earl. Ravenswood Hollow? Yes, sir. He squinted at me, then at Theo in the back seat. Nobody goes to Ravenswood Hollow, ma'am. I have an appointment. He kept squinting. Then he shrugged, pulled out a paper map. Actual paper. Coffee-stained. He circled a spot with a red pen. 2-lane road. Turn where the mailbox has a bird on it. Not a real bird. A carved one. Thank you. Ma'am. I turned to leave. Ma'am. I turned back. That address you got. That's the Ashford place. You be careful up there. I froze. Careful of what? He didn't answer. He just went back to his crossword puzzle. I got in my car. And I drove. The mailbox was exactly where he said. A wooden crow. Weather-beaten. Missing one eye. I turned. The trees closed in. A tunnel of gray branches that let in almost no light. Then the trees opened up. And I hit the brakes, so hard my seatbelt locked. Because there it was. The house from Theo's drawing. 3 stories tall. Victorian. White paint peeling in strips. Slate roof. Wraparound porches. A stone chimney on the left. Half-moon windows on the top floor. And in front of it, a lake. Gray. Still. Surrounded by bare trees. Every detail. Exactly. I sat with my mouth open. Hands frozen on the steering wheel. In the back seat, Theo woke up. He pulled off his headphones. Looked out the window. He didn't seem surprised. He just nodded once. There. I got out of the car. My legs almost buckled. Because standing on the front steps of that impossible house was Harrison Blackwood, waiting. An umbrella in one hand even, though it wasn't raining. A soft gray cashmere coat. He walked down the steps. His smile small and warm. Ms. Marsh. Welcome to Ashford Manor. I couldn't speak. I just pointed at Theo. In the car, rubbing sleep from his eyes. Then I pointed at the house. Blackwood followed my finger, confused for a moment. Then he understood. He raised an eyebrow. Is there a problem? My son. He drew this house. Last night. Before we knew where we were going. Blackwood was quiet for a long moment. Then he said something I would think about for years. Wilhelmina always said this house calls the right people. I never knew what she meant. He looked at Theo again. I think perhaps I do now. I got Theo out of the car, his small hand in mine. He didn't want to be touched most days, but he let me hold his hand as we walked up the steps. Blackwood produced an iron key. Old. Heavy. He unlocked the front door. The hinges groaned. A rush of air came out. Cold, but not stale. It smelled like old wood and lavender and something else. Something I couldn't name at first. Then I did. Home. It smelled like a home. Like a place someone had actually lived. For a long, long time. The foyer was enormous. Hardwood floors. Scuffed but polished under the scuffs. A grand staircase sweeping up to the second floor. Above us, a crystal chandelier. Cobwebs draped like veils. But every crystal still there. To the left, a formal sitting room. Furniture under white sheets. To the right, a library. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves. Theo made a small sound. I looked down. His eyes were huge. He was staring at the chandelier. Then at the staircase. Then at the library. He wasn't overwhelmed. He was in awe. He let go of my hand. Walked into the middle of the foyer. Turning slowly in a circle. Blackwood stood beside me. Watching him. Wilhelmina lived here alone for 43 years. She was widowed in 1994. No children. No siblings living. She made her fortune in commercial textile manufacturing. Then she retired here. Why? Why alone in a place this big? Because this house was the only place she ever really felt at peace. He gestured toward the library. But she was not lonely in the way you might think. She had Beatrice. And she had Reverend Callahan. And she had her work. Her work, you'll see. He led me through the foyer. Past the library. Through a butler's pantry, with copper pans still hanging from hooks. Into the back of the house. Then Blackwood stopped at a door I would have walked right past. Under the back staircase. Painted the same color as the wall. He turned to me. Ms. Marsh, what I am about to show you is the reason for this meeting. And the reason for the dollar. He paused. Are you ready? I looked at Theo. He'd wandered into the library. Pulled a book off a low shelf. Content. I nodded. Show me. Blackwood opened the door. Stone steps descended into darkness. He flicked a switch. Old bulbs flickered on. At the bottom was a second door. Heavy. Wooden. Iron braces. Blackwood used a second key. The lock clicked. He pushed the door open. And I stepped into the room. That would change everything. Climate controlled. A wine cellar. That's what it had been built to be. Stone walls. Vaulted ceiling. But there was no wine. There was art. Paintings. Everywhere. Lining the walls. Mounted on custom racks that stretched from floor to ceiling. Each one wrapped in acid-free protective cloth. In the center of the room, wooden crates. Dozens of them. I couldn't move. Blackwood walked to the nearest painting. Carefully pulled back the protective cloth. Oil on canvas. Massive. Maybe 6 feet wide. A rocky coastline at sunrise. Bold brushstrokes. Colors so vivid they looked wet. The signature in the bottom right corner. J. Rothberry. I made a small sound. Rothberry. Blackwood turned. Surprised. You know the name? I saw one of his paintings at a charity auction. 6 years ago. Before Theo got sick. It sold for $120,000. Blackwood nodded. That was 6 years ago. Rothberry has since become one of the most collected living American painters. This piece today would go for closer to $400. He gestured around the room. There are 63 paintings in this cellar, Ms. Marsh. Rothberry. Cordelia McAllister. Beatrice Hartley. John Farrant. Names you might not know, but every one of them collected by museums. Every one of them at the top of the contemporary American market. He paused. The current insured value of this collection is $15 million. My knees gave out. I sat down, right there, on the cold stone floor, and I let myself, finally, exhale. A long, ragged breath. 2 years of being told I was nothing, leaving my body. Blackwood didn't say anything. He just waited, patient, steady. After a long while, I looked up. Why? Why what, Ms. Marsh? Why me? I barely knew her. He crouched down, slowly, his knees creaking. He was almost 70, and he crouched down on that stone floor to be at eye level with me. Because she chose you. She watched you, from a distance, for a very long time, and she decided. That doesn't make sense. It will. Come, there's more to see. He held out his hand. I took it. He helped me up. We climbed back up the stone stairs. Theo was still in the library. Now he'd pulled down 3 more books. He was arranging them in some order only he understood. He was fine. Blackwood led me out the back door. Behind the house, at the end of a stone path lined with dead rose bushes, was a large outbuilding. 2 stories. White paint. A wide double door. A carriage house. Blackwood pulled a chain. The doors rolled up on old tracks. I stepped inside, and I gasped. Because there, under white cloth covers, were 11 cars. Not just cars. Cars. Blackwood pulled back the first cover. A Duesenberg Model J, cream and burgundy. 1935. He pulled back the second. An Aston Martin DB5. Silver. 1964. Same model James Bond drove. The third. A Ferrari 250 GT Lusso. Red. 1963. Then a Jaguar E-Type. British Racing Green. 1961. A Mercedes 300 SL Gullwing. Silver. 1955. I stopped counting. How much? The Mercedes alone, Ms. Marsh. $2.2 million at auction. The Ferrari, $1.8. The Duesenberg, roughly $1.4. Altogether, approximately $8 million. $15 million in the basement. $8 million in the carriage house. $23 million. For a woman who'd been laughed at yesterday for inheriting a single $1 bill. I sat down on the running board of the Duesenberg, head in my hands. Blackwood sat down next to me, careful of his suit. Ms. Marsh, I need to tell you the rest. Because it is going to get harder before it gets easier. I lifted my head. There's more? Yes. He reached into his coat pocket, pulled out a sealed cream envelope. He held it out. What is this? A letter. From Wilhelmina. Written the week before she died. What does it say? I don't know. She sealed it in front of me. Made me promise. Give it to you after you saw everything. Only open it when you were alone. Truly alone. She was very specific about that. I took the envelope. It was heavier than paper should be. I put it in my coat pocket. I couldn't open it now. Blackwood seemed to understand. He nodded, then cleared his throat. Now, the practical matters. He walked me back to the main house. Sat me down at the enormous oak table in the dining room. Pulled a folder from his briefcase. There are conditions, Ms. Marsh. Of course there are. If you accept this inheritance, you must live in this house full-time for 12 consecutive months. You cannot sell, lease, or transfer any assets in that time. If you leave the property for more than 7 consecutive days without written notice, the entire estate reverts to the New York Historical Preservation Society. I stared at him. 12 months. Yes. I have a life. A job. My son has a therapist. A routine. I stopped. Because. What life? What job? What routine? A cramped apartment, where my son screamed at the light fixtures. I looked around the dining room. At the chandelier. The heavy drapes. The stone fireplace at the far end. At a house that had already made my son mysteriously calm. Blackwood was still talking. There are also financial obligations. Property taxes are $24,000 overdue. The roof needs repair, estimated at $38,000. Utilities have been off for 4 years. Total immediate need, approximately $90,000. My laugh came out wrong. $90,000. Yes. I have $11. In cash. In my wallet. Blackwood didn't smile. He just pulled a second envelope. Wilhelmina anticipated that. He slid it across the table. I opened it. A cashier's check. $65,000. Made out to Adeline Marie Marsh. I put my hand over my mouth. There is also a separate operating account of $42,000 for basic living expenses over the next year. I couldn't speak. After the 12 months, the restrictions lift. Wilhelmina asked only that you wait 1 year. Why? Blackwood smiled for the first time all day. A small, private smile. She wanted you to fall in love with the house before you decided its fate. She was strategic that way. That was when the back door opened. Not the front. The back. A woman walked in. 69 years old. Gray hair braided into a crown on top of her head. A wool cardigan the color of oatmeal. Sensible shoes. She was carrying a wicker basket full of dried lavender. She stopped when she saw me. Her eyes went wide, then wet. Then she set the basket down on the counter, very carefully, and she walked over. Slowly, deliberately, she put her hand on my cheek. Her hand was warm and calloused and smelled like herbs. Adeline Marie Marsh. I nodded. I didn't know what else to do. I have waited for you for a very long time. I looked at Blackwood. Ms. Marsh. This is Mrs. Beatrice Hollis. She was Wilhelmina's housekeeper for 34 years. She lives in the cottage at the edge of the property. She will be your neighbor. And, if you'll have her, your friend. Beatrice's eyes were streaming now. I have wanted to meet you since the day Wilhelmina told me about you. Which was, dear, 1998. 1998. I was 6 years old in 1998. I opened my mouth. To ask. To beg for an explanation. But that was when Theo appeared in the doorway, his hand full of book pages he'd folded into complicated shapes. Cranes, boxes, stars. He was staring at Beatrice. Beatrice turned slowly, looked at him. She didn't crouch down. She didn't put on a baby voice. She didn't do any of the things adults do when they meet a child like Theo and make it worse. She just looked at him, and she said, "Hello, Theodore." He looked at her for a very long time. Then he walked over, held out one of the folded paper cranes. He didn't say anything, but he made eye contact. For almost 4 full seconds. I had to sit down again, because Theo did not make eye contact. Not with strangers, not with family, except, apparently, with this house, and the people who came with it. That night, I couldn't drive home. Blackwood had already anticipated it. A room prepared. Second floor. 2 twin beds. Fresh sheets. Wool blankets. A working fireplace. Beatrice had made stew. On a gas camp stove she'd set up in the kitchen. She fed us both. Theo ate 3 bowls, which was impossible. Theo did not eat unfamiliar food. But he ate 3 bowls of Beatrice's beef stew. Then he fell asleep on a wingback chair in the library, wrapped in a wool throw. His paper cranes lined up on the armrest. I sat by the fire, in a chair across from him. The sealed letter still in my coat pocket. I could feel it there, weighing. I looked at Theo, sleeping, safe. Then I reached into my pocket, and I pulled the envelope out. I looked at Theo one more time, and I opened it. 4 pages of handwritten cream-colored stationery. Blue ink, elegant script, a little shaky in places, but readable. My dear Adeline, if you are reading this, I am gone. And I am very sorry that we did not meet as we should have. That is my greatest regret. You do not know this. But your mother, Constance Wentworth, was the closest friend I ever had. I stopped reading. My breath left my body. I read the sentence again. Then again. We met at Vassar in 1969. She was studying English literature. I was studying art history. We were roommates for 3 years. She was the maid of honor at my wedding to Robert in 1972. I introduced her to your father, Nathaniel Wentworth Sr., at a Guggenheim benefit in the fall of 1990. She wore a green dress. I still remember it. When she was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer in 1996, I sat with her every Tuesday and Friday at Memorial Sloan Kettering. For 9 months. Until the end. You were 4 years old. She talked about you constantly. She held my hand 3 days before she died. And she made me promise not to interfere with your childhood. She wanted you to have a normal life, but to watch from a distance. And if you were ever in trouble, real trouble, to find you. I kept the first half of that promise. God help me, I kept it too well. Tears were falling on the paper. I moved the letter. I watched you graduate from nursing school in 2014. I was in the audience. 3rd row. You didn't see me. I watched you marry Bradford Kensington in 2016. I prayed you wouldn't. Vivian Kensington is a woman I have known for 40 years. She is not a good person. She never was. But you were happy, and I did not interfere. I watched Theodore be born in 2017. From the parking lot of the hospital, actually. I sent flowers. You probably don't remember them. They were signed only a friend of your mother's. I did remember them. White lilies. I'd kept the card. It was still in a box in my closet. When Theodore was diagnosed, and when Bradford left you, I finally understood. This was the trouble your mother had spoken of. I began planning immediately, but I need to tell you the other reason I chose you. The deeper one. I had a brother. The next line was blurry through my tears. His name was Nathaniel. He was born in 1948, 6 years younger than me. He was like Theodore, Adeline. He did not speak until he was 5. He did not make eye contact. He rocked himself for comfort. He was fascinated by the movement of light on water. In 1961, when he was 13, my parents committed him to Willowbrook State School on Staten Island. Please, when you have a moment, look up what Willowbrook was. I cannot bring myself to describe it here. I would look it up later. I would sit up until 3 in the morning reading news articles from 1972 about the conditions Geraldo Rivera exposed at Willowbrook. But that would come later. Nathaniel died there in 1966. He was 18 years old. Pneumonia. Untreated. My parents did not attend the funeral. There was no funeral. They had him cremated by the state. I have carried him with me for 58 years, Adeline. When I saw Theodore's diagnosis, I knew. I knew that God had given me a chance. Not to save Nathaniel. That door is closed forever. But to save Theodore. To give a boy like my brother a house full of light. A room to paint in. A lake to watch. People who see him. Instead of a state institution and a common grave. That is why I chose you, Adeline. Because you love your son. The way I love my brother. And the way I could not save. Take the house. Take the paintings. Take the cars. But most of all, take the chance I could not give Nathaniel. Give it to Theodore. All my love. Across every year I did not know you. Your Aunt Willa. I don't know how long I sat by the fire. The letter in my lap. My son sleeping 10 feet away. I thought about a boy named Nathaniel. Dying at 18. His body cremated by strangers. I thought about my great Aunt Willa. Carrying that grief for 58 years. Watching my mother die. Watching me from parking lots. Waiting. I stood up. I walked to the wingback chair. I knelt in front of my son. I pressed my forehead against his forehead. Very gently. And I whispered, I promise. I don't know who I was promising. Willa. Nathaniel. My mother. God. Maybe all of them. 6 weeks later, we moved in. I gave Mrs. Kowalski 2 months of rent as a goodbye gift. She cried. I cried. Theo let her hug him for the first time. Utilities came on. Taxes were paid. The roof was patched enough for winter. Ms. Marguerite Delacroix agreed to come once a week on Saturdays. 2 hours each way. I paid her every dollar I had ever owed her. Plus a bonus. I met the women of the Ravenswood Hollow Presbyterian Church at a Wednesday evening prayer group. Reverend Ruth Callahan led the service. She was 65. Silver hair. Eyes that had seen everything. She hugged me before she even introduced herself. Willa told me all about you, sweetheart. Sit down. There's soup. There were 14 women in that group. 55 to 78 years old. Widows. Divorcees. farmers' wives, a retired librarian, a woman who'd been a stunt driver for the movies in the 70s. They came to my house in shifts, brought casseroles, helped me paint the kitchen. Theo bloomed, slowly, carefully, like a plant that had been sitting in a dark closet. By the end of week 4, he was sleeping through the night for the first time in 3 years. By week 5, he'd painted 7 watercolors of the lake, all from the window of the attic studio Willa had prepared for him 3 years before she died. By week 6, he made eye contact with Reverend Ruth for 11 full seconds. I marked it on the calendar in the kitchen. Every small thing was a miracle. I paid the debt the only way I knew how. I loved my son. Louder. Slower. In a house big enough to hold every ounce of it. Then, on a Tuesday in early January, I checked the mail. I'd started walking down the gravel driveway every morning. It was a mile round trip. Snow boots, bundled in one of Beatrice's old wool coats. There was one letter that day, legal-sized envelope, from a Manhattan law firm, Holloway and Grant, LLP. My hands went cold as I opened it. I read the first sentence. Then I read it again. Then I sat down, on a snowbank, in the middle of my driveway. And I stared at the words, until they stopped making sense. Notice of contest. In the matter of the estate of Wilhelmina Prudence Ashford, petitioner Vivian Rose Kensington hereby contests the validity of the will executed June 14, 2024, on grounds of testamentary incapacity and undue influence. Hearing scheduled for January 21, 2025. 9 days from today. 9 days. I dropped the letter in the snow. Then I did the only thing I could think to do. I stood up, and I ran back to the house. I had to call Blackwood. I had to warn Beatrice. I had to figure out how to fight a woman who had already destroyed me once. For a house that had, somehow, in 6 weeks, become the only thing I could not bear to lose. I ran up the driveway, with the letter clutched in my fist. My boots slipped on ice. I fell once, got up, kept running. By the time I reached the porch, my lungs were burning. Beatrice was on the porch, sweeping snow. She took one look at me, dropped the broom. What? I couldn't speak. I just held out the letter. She read it. Her jaw tightened. Her eyes went hard. Then she did something I didn't expect. She smiled. Small, grim, almost pleased. Vivian finally did it. What do you mean finally? Willa said she would. She said it would take about 6 weeks after the funeral for Vivian to figure out what she'd lost. Looks like Willa was right on the money. Beatrice. She's suing me. I know, sweetheart. She has a Manhattan law firm. I know. I have a small-town attorney and $65,000 I've already spent on a roof. Beatrice put her hands on my shoulders. Squeezed. Hard. Adeline, listen to me. Willa spent 3 years preparing for this exact day. Now go call Harrison Blackwood. And then go sit with your son, because you're about to walk into the fight of your life, and you cannot walk in scared. I stared at her. Do you understand me? Yes. Good. Move. Blackwood answered on the second ring. Ms. Marsh. They filed. Silence for a beat. Then, calm as a lake in July. 9 days out. 9 days. Come to my office tomorrow morning. Bring the letter. Bring nothing else. Wilhelmina left everything I need. Everything. Harrison. Please tell me we can win this. Ms. Marsh. Wilhelmina Ashford was the smartest woman I ever worked for. And she did not spend 3 years building a fortress just so Vivian Kensington could kick it down. Come to Albany tomorrow. You'll see. He hung up. I stood in the kitchen holding the phone, listening to the dial tone, heart pounding. Then I looked up, and Theo was standing in the doorway, watching me. He walked over, put his small hand on my knee, looked up, and he said, very clearly, Mama sad. 2 words, in the right order, meaning what they meant. I dropped to my knees, and I hugged my son, and he let me, for 22 full seconds. I counted. The next morning, I drove to Albany. Blackwood's office was empty except for him, and a paralegal named Denise, who brought me coffee, and looked at me like I was the second coming. He spread documents across the conference table. Medical evaluations. 4 of them. Every 6 months for 3 years. Neurologist. Psychiatrist. 2 independent geriatric specialists. Every single one signed. Notarized. Time-stamped. Every single one saying the same thing. Wilhelmina Ashford was of sound mind. Then Blackwood pulled out a hard drive. The video. How long? 94 minutes. 94. She was thorough. He plugged the drive into a monitor, hit play, and there she was, Wilhelmina Prudence Ashford, age 82, sitting in the same wingback chair Theo had slept in 6 weeks ago. Silver hair pinned up, pearls at her throat, a gray cashmere sweater, reading glasses on a chain, eyes like polished slate. She looked directly into the camera. My name is Wilhelmina Prudence Ashford. Today is June 14th, 2024. I am 82 years old. I am of sound mind. I am on no medications that impair cognition. I am recording this so that no one, in any court, in any state, can claim otherwise. Her voice was steady, precise. I am leaving the entirety of my estate to Adeline Marie Marsh. She is the daughter of my dearest friend, the late Constance Wentworth. Adeline did not know I was doing this. Adeline did not ask for a single dollar. Adeline did not manipulate me. I chose her. I put my hand over my mouth. She kept going. I am specifically excluding Vivian Rose Kensington and her son, Bradford Alexander Kensington. Not because they are strangers to me, but because they are family, who behaved worse than strangers. Blackwood paused the video. Turned to me. There's more. Much more. She catalogs every painting, every car, explains why she bought each one, and when, and from whom. Why does that matter? Because Holloway will try to argue she was confused, making random purchases. 94 minutes of specific, dated, documented decision-making. Destroys that argument in the first 10. He hit play again. I watched my great-aunt Willa defend me from beyond the grave. For 94 minutes. I didn't move once. That night, I couldn't sleep. At 2 in the morning, I got up, padded down the hallway in wool socks. I went to the library, lit a fire, wrapped myself in Beatrice's old wool throw, and I pulled out the sealed envelope one more time. I read it again, every word, every line, but this time I stopped at a paragraph I'd skimmed the first time. Your mother and I made a promise to each other, Adeline. She promised to name you Adeline Marie, after my mother, if she ever had a daughter. I promised her that if she ever couldn't be there for you, I would be. She kept her end. You are Adeline Marie Wentworth Marsh. She wrote your name on my hand in the hospital the day before she died. In blue pen. It stayed there for 3 days. I have spent 30 years wondering if I would ever be able to keep mine. My mother, writing my name on Willa's hand. I sat with that image until the fire burned down. Then I got up, went to the phone, and I called my mother. For in the morning, Florida time, she answered on the first ring, because mothers of daughters in trouble never really sleep. Adeline, Mom, you need to tell me about Willa. Long silence. Then, in a voice I had not heard from her in 20 years. Small, girlish, broken. Where do you want me to start? The beginning. She talked for 2 hours. By the end, I understood everything. And I forgave her for being too afraid to tell me sooner. For letting a woman like Vivian Kensington intimidate her into silence. For 30 years of watching from too far away. Because she'd loved my father. And she'd loved me. And she'd been trying to hold herself together the only way she knew how. Just like I had been. Just like most of the women I knew had been. The morning of the hearing, I couldn't eat. Beatrice made pancakes. I stared at them. Then I pushed them across the table to Theo. He ate 4. I put on the gray suit Beatrice had given me. It had belonged to Willa. It fit like it had been made for me. I looked at myself in the mirror in the front hallway. I did not look like the woman who had walked into that Albany law office 2 months ago. I looked like someone Willa had known was in there. All along. Reverend Ruth pulled up in her Buick at 8 sharp. Behind her, 3 more cars from the church. 14 women in total. They didn't say anything when I came out. They just formed a line, silent, and waited for me to walk between them to my car. Beatrice took Theo for the day. He hugged me at the door. And he said one more sentence I would never forget. You come back. Not a question, a command. I told him I would. Then I got in Reverend Ruth's Buick, and we drove to the courthouse. Columbia County Circuit's Court. 9 a.m. Sharp. Vivian Kensington was already there. Front row of the petitioner's side. She saw me walk in. She did not smile this time. Her eyes went past me, to the 14 women filing in behind me. Something in her face flickered. Confusion. Then something worse. Discomfort. Because Vivian Kensington had spent her entire life fighting alone. Even with her armies of lawyers, she'd always been alone. and she'd assumed I would be too. I was not alone. The women of Ravenswood Hollow Presbyterian filled 2 full rows behind me. Not one of them said a word. They just sat down, folded their hands, and watched. Bradford was there too. 3rd row. Alone. No Celeste today. He wouldn't look at me. Some things never change. Preston Halloway rose first. Silver hair. Custom suit. $2,200 shoes. The kind of lawyer who made a living convincing juries that old women didn't know what they were doing. He was smooth. Terrifyingly smooth. He spoke for 22 minutes. He painted a picture. Wilhelmina Ashford. 82. Widowed. Isolated. Living alone in a crumbling mansion. No family visits. No community involvement. Then, suddenly, out of nowhere, leaves an estate worth, conservatively, $20 million to a distant grandniece she had not seen in over 20 years. A grandniece who, he was careful to note, was drowning in medical debt. Had a special needs child. Had every possible financial motive. Every eye in the courtroom turned to me. I kept my face still. Halloway pointed at me. His hand steady. Practiced. This is not the act of a woman of sound mind. This is the act of a confused, isolated, manipulated woman. And Ms. Marsh, whether wittingly or unwittingly, was the manipulator. Vivian almost smiled. Caught herself. Looked down. Halloway sat. Judge Elizabeth Reeves. 61 years old. Silver hair. A face that had been through 3 divorces and 40 years of the law. She looked at Blackwood. Counsel for the estate. Response. Blackwood stood. Slowly. He didn't rush. He never rushed. Your Honor, may I request permission to enter 4 medical evaluations, conducted by 4 independent physicians, every 6 months for 3 years, all confirming Ms. Ashford's full testamentary capacity. Granted. He walked the reports to the bench. Judge Reeves took her time. She read every page. She flipped to signatures. Checked notary seals. 10 full minutes. The courtroom silent. Then she looked up. These are unusually thorough, Counselor. Ms. Ashford was, if I may say, Your Honor, an unusually thorough woman. The judge's mouth twitched. Not a smile, but close. Continue. Your Honor, I would also request permission to enter a video-recorded statement, executed by Ms. Ashford on the same date as the will. Duration 94 minutes. Halloway shot up. Objection. 94 minutes is excessive. We request a summary rather than full playback. Judge Reeves didn't even look at him. Denied. If Ms. Ashford took 94 minutes to explain her wishes, this court will take 94 minutes to hear them. Bailiff, set up the screen. The lights dimmed. The screen flickered, and Willa appeared. The whole courtroom went still. Even Vivian. Because there was something arresting about Willa Ashford on that screen. Sitting in her wingback chair. Voice steady. Eyes clear. She was not a confused old woman. She was a general. Reviewing her battlefield. I am leaving the entirety of my estate to Adeline Marie Marsh. Vivian's face during the video was something I will remember until I die. At first, confident. At minute 12, uncertain. Because Willa had just described, in perfect detail, the purchase of a Rothbury painting in 1994. Including the exact price. The gallery. The name of the dealer. At minute 35, pale. Because Willa was reciting the mileage on the 1955 Mercedes Gullwing. As of the last service. 3 months before her death. At minute 61. Something else. Because Willa had shifted topics. She was now talking about Vivian. I did not include Vivian Rose Kensington in this estate for a very specific reason. Vivian is not a stupid woman. But she is a cruel one. I have in my possession an audio recording, made in the summer of 2022. Of Vivian referring to her own biological grandson, a boy named Theodore, as, and I quote, a genetic mistake that should never have been born. That recording is now in the custody of my attorney. If any member of the Kensington family contests this will, that recording will be released as evidence. Publicly. The entire courtroom turned to look at Vivian. She had gone the color of paper. Her hands were shaking in her lap. Blackwood, without a word, held up a small black USB drive. He set it on the evidence table, very gently. Vivian let out a sound. Small. Choked. Not a laugh this time. The opposite of a laugh. The video kept playing. Willa cataloging paintings. Cars. Trust structures. Every minute. More evidence. More proof. Then, at minute 89, Willa did something no one expected. She softened. The general put down her sword. She looked directly into the camera, and her voice changed. Vivian, if you are watching this, and I know you will be, I want to say one thing to you. The courtroom held its breath. I am not angry with you anymore. I spent 40 years being angry with you. It was exhausting. I am tired now, so I am letting it go. But I want you to understand something. You did not fail me. You did not fail my husband. You failed yourself. You spent your entire life believing that a different child, a child who did not speak, or did not sit still, or did not fit, was ashamed to be hidden. My parents believed that too. It killed my brother, Nathaniel, in Willowbrook State School in 1966. He was 18 years old. Vivian looked up, her mouth open. You did the same thing to your own grandson. You called him a mistake. You told your son to leave his wife because she was burdened with him. You made him ashamed of a child God gave him to love. I could not save Nathaniel. My parents' cruelty took him. But I could save Theodore. And I could save Adeline. And so I did. Willa paused, took a slow breath. I pray you find peace, Vivian. But you will not find it in this courtroom. Because this house was never going to be yours. It was always going to be theirs. Goodbye. The screen went black. The lights came up. Nobody moved for a long moment. Then Vivian Kensington bent forward in her chair and began to cry. Not the pretty tears of a woman playing for sympathy. Real ones. The kind of tears a person cries when they finally see themselves and can't unsee it. Bradford, 3 rows behind her, put his face in his hands. Preston Holloway was rifling through his papers, looking for something. Anything. He found nothing. Judge Reeves removed her reading glasses, set them on the bench. Very deliberately, she looked at Holloway. Counsel, do you have any evidence beyond speculation to suggest undue influence? Holloway rose halfway, then sank back down. No, Your Honor. Do you have any evidence to challenge the medical assessments? No, Your Honor. Do you have any evidence at all beyond the fact that your client did not like the outcome of her aunt-in-law's will? Silence. No, Your Honor. Judge Reeves lifted her gavel. She looked at me, just for a second, and I saw something I would treasure for the rest of my life. Respect. She brought the gavel down. Crack. Motion denied. The will stands as executed. The estate is the sole property of Adeline Marie Marsh. Petitioner shall bear all legal costs. Court is adjourned. Crack. I did not stand up right away. I sat in my chair, hands folded in my lap, trying to breathe. Reverend Ruth put her hand on my shoulder. Squeezed once, then let go. Behind me, I heard the sound of 14 women. Not cheering, not crying, just letting out breath. Together, like a congregation, which is what they were. I stood up, turned to leave. Vivian was in the aisle, blocking my path. Her mascara had run. Her lipstick was smudged. She looked exactly her age for the first time since I'd known her. She looked at me for a long moment. She opened her mouth, as if to say something. Then she closed it. She stepped aside. I walked past her. At the door, I stopped. I turned back, because I had one thing to say. Just one. Vivian. She looked up. You said I was worthless. In front of your son. In front of a lawyer's office. In front of God. I paused. You were wrong. And now you know it. And you have to live with that. I paused again. I forgive you. For me. Not for you. I turned and walked out. Bradford was standing in the doorway. He stepped aside. He tried to catch my eye. I did not look at him. Some doors, once you close them, stay closed forever. I drove home in Reverend Ruth's Buick. Nobody spoke for a long time. Then, somewhere outside of Hudson, one of the women in the back seat, a retired schoolteacher named Frances, started humming Amazing Grace. Then another woman joined her. Then another. By the time we pulled into the driveway at Ashford Manor, all 14 of them were singing. I didn't sing. I just listened. And I let myself, finally, believe it was over. 8 months later, I sold 6 paintings through Sotheby's. $3.8 million. I sold 2 cars through RM Sotheby's. For $0.2 million. I paid off every medical bill. I paid Ms. Marguerite Delacroix every dollar I had ever owed her. Then I gave her a check for $80,000 and asked if she'd like to be the director of a new nonprofit foundation. She cried. She said yes. I reactivated my nursing license because I missed the work and because I wanted Theo to grow up watching me do something that mattered. I established the Wilhelmina Ashford Foundation. Its mission: to provide art therapy, sensory-safe learning environments, and educational scholarships for children with ADHD, autism, and other neurodevelopmental differences. Reverend Ruth served as spiritual advisor. Beatrice served as house manager. Ms. Marguerite served as clinical director. 3 women, between the ages of 65 and 69, running a multi-million-dollar foundation out of a Victorian mansion in a town nobody could find on a map. Willow would have laughed. She would have loved every second of it. 3 years after the hearing, Ashford Manor was fully restored. Fresh white paint, new slate on the roof. The gardens Beatrice had spent 30 years tending were now open to the public every Sunday. The carriage house had been converted into the Nathaniel Ashford Center for the Arts, named after Willow's brother, the boy who had died in Willowbrook at 18. His photograph hung by the front entrance. Willow had kept it in a drawer for 58 years. Now it hung in a place of honor, framed in walnut. Beneath it, a small brass plaque. Nathaniel Robert Ashford, 1948 to 1966, beloved brother, remembered always. 40 children with special needs attended the center every week. Art classes, music, pottery, occupational therapy, all free of charge. Theo was one of them. He was 10 years old now. He had started speaking in full sentences at age 8. He read at a 4th grade level. He still did not love eye contact with strangers, but he laughed, loud and often. He painted every day. His most recent piece was titled The House Mama Saw Before I Saw It. He had signed it Theodore Ashford Marsh. I had cried when I saw the signature. He had added Ashford, all on his own. He said it was because Aunt Willa had made a place for him. And boys who had places should carry the name. Vivian Kensington was declared personally bankrupt in the spring of 2028. Legal fees from the contested will had reached $340,000. Her investment portfolio had cratered. The Greenwich house was sold. She moved into a studio apartment in Stamford. Bradford divorced Celeste after 4 years. He called me twice. The first time, to apologize. I let him. It took him 11 minutes. I did not interrupt. Then I said, quietly, because I meant it, thank you for saying it. It doesn't change anything. The second time, he called to ask if he could see Theo. I told him, very gently, you can see him, if he wants to see you. That is up to Theo. I asked Theo. He listened. He looked at his hands for a while. Then he pointed to the painting on the wall. Mama, Grandma B, Aunt Ruth, Ms. Marguerite, me. He looked up at me. That is my family. He is not in the picture. Bradford came anyway. One Saturday afternoon in June. He stayed for 42 minutes. Theo showed him a paintbrush, then went back upstairs to his studio. Bradford drove home crying. I watched from the porch until his car disappeared down the gravel road. Then I went back inside, because there was soup on the stove, and Theo needed help with a new watercolor. And Beatrice was calling me to help her braid a wreath of lavender for the front door. I had a life to live. Sunset, October, 3 years after the courthouse. I stood on the back porch of Ashford Manor, a cup of tea in one hand, a framed picture in the other. The frame held 2 things. Willa's letter, just the first page, and a crisp $1 bill. I had never spent it. I had framed it, and I looked at it every morning, and every night, to remember. Below the porch, on the wide green lawn, Ms. Marguerite was leading a group of 5 children in a painting class. They were painting the lake. Theo was among them, his paintbrush purple with lake reflections, his face concentrated, his whole body relaxed in a way it had never been in the Yonkers apartment. Behind me, in the herb garden, Reverend Ruth was tying up dried lavender in bundles for the church craft fair. In the kitchen, Beatrice was singing along to a Patsy Cline record. The house smelled like bread and lavender and wood smoke. I sipped my tea, and I thought about the woman I had been 3 years ago, sitting in a lawyer's office, holding a $1 bill, being laughed at by a woman in a mink coat. I thought about how sure I had been, that morning, that my life was over. And how wrong I had been, because life is not what people say about you. Life is what you do next. Life is who shows up, and how you let them love you, and how you love them back. Life is a great aunt you barely knew, watching you from parking lots. For 30 years, waiting for the day she could keep her promise. Life is a housekeeper who folds laundry and remembers your son's favorite color. Life is a woman minister with silver hair who leads 14 women in amazing grace in the back of a Buick because you won a court case. Life is a boy who was told he was a mistake, growing up in a house where every wall is filled with his paintings. Life is a dollar bill that turned out to be everything. Theo came running up the porch steps, purple paint on his hands. His face flushed from the cold. He held up his brush. "Mama." "Yes, baby. Come paint with me." 3 words, in the right order. An invitation, something my son had never given anyone in his entire life. I set down my tea. I set down the frame. I took his purple hand. I let my 10-year-old son let me down the porch steps into the last golden light of a fall afternoon, to sit on the lawn beside a lake that a woman named Wilhelmina Ashford had loved. I picked up a paintbrush, and I painted with him for the first time of many. Some inheritances come in the form of money. Some come in the form of houses. Some come in the form of paintings and cars and trusts. But the real inheritance, the one that changes you, is the belief that you are worth more than the people who tried to destroy you said you were. Sometimes that belief comes from your own mother. Sometimes it comes from your father, or your husband, or your children. But sometimes, when those people fail you, it comes from a stranger who watched you from a parking lot in 1992 and kept a promise she made to a friend she loved for 30 years, until she could put a house and $1 and a letter into your hands and say, from beyond every door that ever closed on you, you were always worth more. You were always worth more. You were always worth more. I am Adeline Marie Marsh. My son Theodore is 10 years old. He is happy. He is safe. He is home. And this lake, this porch, this life, was built from a $1 bill. The end.